Welcome to Pitch in the Zone, a weekly gathering of coaches that help one presenter with a 3-minute pitch. Today is kind of a special day. We have all of our coaches here assembled. We have Nathan Gold, Scottie Spurzem, Michael Marchuk, Massimo Peroncelli, Rick Pollak, and Stuart Pink. All of them seasoned presenters, extremely experienced coaches, and a lot of knowledge and experience in the startup world. What makes today somewhat special is our speaker didn't show up. So this is the first time. This is Pitch in the Zone number 78, and it's the first time that we actually do not have a presenter. So what I would like to do is simply have a little fireside chat amongst all of the coaches that spend each and every week here their valuable time to help presenters with their pitches. And today, let me just find out what are the top tips that all of us have to help presenters put their best foot forward. And we are not going to do this like one person, but let's just go mix and mingle. Somebody might say something that triggers a thought in another person. So let's make this as engaging as possible. And let me just start the round today with Nathan. Nathan, you have been coaching people, professionals, to give their high stakes presentations for 14 years already. So you have so much experience with helping presenters put their best foot forward. Nathan, what is your number one tip that you can give to presenters either presenting on a stage or on a screen?
That's an easy one, and that is always start on time. Make sure that the people you're presenting to know that you respect their time and that you won't waste their time. From my understanding, that's one of the most important signals you need to cover as a presenter or as a speaker before you get into your content. Otherwise, they're wondering, is this going to be a good use of my time? Am I going to get anything out of this kind of thing? So by just starting on time or reflecting on the fact that you are not going to waste their time can set up your whole presentation with much more open-mindedness in your audience and get them more curious about what's coming. Now, obviously, you can't always start on time, so there's ways of just getting up there at the top of the hour if that's when it starts and reflect or just recognize that thank the people who are there on time or early. If you have to wait a few more minutes, then you can easily say, we're just going to wait 3 more minutes until blah, 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 and then we'll get started. But being on time, starting on time, finishing on time, or early is part of the magic to keeping people curious about wanting more of your time. And those messages can be direct or indirect. And just saying, hey, thank you everybody for your time, and then getting into your content is not what I'm talking about. Thank you for your time
What are you talking about?
Yes.
How do you do it?
Thank you for your time today. In the next 40 minutes, we will cover A, B, and C. Okay, so now they know I respect their 40 minutes, or give them a sense of what's going to happen in that time you have with them.
Excellent.
Excellent. I like what he said about that is you starting on time is one piece. And when you start talking about them, you're talking about, thank you for your time. And now we're going to talk about this. You know what you're going to talk about. The audience doesn't necessarily know, but right. You need to know your audience. And this is one of the things I see most frequently when we have folks who are doing pitches that are related to investors. They'll often start pitching about themselves and their team and that sort of thing, and forget completely or deviate into a customer-centric thing, saying our customers can do X, Y, Z, the features and benefits of this thing are wonderful, blah, blah, blah. And they forget that they're actually talking to investors who want to know, how am I going to make money? How are you going to protect my investment? I'm investing in you. What do I know about you? And so knowing your audience is very important, so that when you start telling them and say, thank you for your time, the next 40 minutes we're going to talk about X, is because you know what they want to hear, or they know why they're there, and you're going to give them what they're expecting.
Brilliant, brilliant. Absolutely. Knowing your audience, giving a time signal so that people have the right expectations. I always say, disappointment requires adequate planning. And by setting the expectations properly, of course, you're minimizing the chance that there will be any disappointment. Excellent. Thank you so much so far, Nathan, Michael. Let's move on. Rick, you also have a lot of experience coaching people, including TEDx speakers. And so I'm curious, when it comes to TEDx, it's a slightly different style of presenting than a pitch or a sales presentation. What is the first advice that you usually give to somebody that you start coaching for their TEDx big moment?
Well, I think with TEDx, that will apply really for anything, but especially for TEDx, it's more of that idea worth sharing. To spread that idea is to give the audience a reason to care. And that is, especially in an 18-minute talk, usually without fancy graphics or slides. But I think a lot of presenters, whether it's TEDx or an investor pitch, and following up what Michael was saying, why should they care? And people forget about that. They get into all the technical details and all the sales pitches or whatever. But, first the audience has to care. And then from that is more of saying, and I use the metaphor of a medic, because I'm the presentation medic. But what does a medic do? It's examine, diagnose, and prescribe. Examine the audience. What does it, tell me about this TEDx audience, tell me about these investors, what is the problem they have, and then diagnose that. And then the prescribe is the call to action. I think too many people get into, without diagnosing, they just start throwing all the stuff out there. We can do this, it can do that, here's a feature, here's a benefit, without thinking of whether it's TEDx or not. TEDx is one big idea. An investor pitch could be, what's the one thing that's most important? Diagnosing for that investor. How are they going to make money? What problem does this solve? And the prescribe in a TEDx is, what do you want people to do after it? Too many TEDx speakers just go through things like investor pitches. They'll go through some things that they think are really cool, but in TEDx, and Stuart and I coach TEDx together, and I'm interested in what Stuart has to say, but it's more of when someone's finished with that TEDx talk, what do they want the audience to do differently? How are they going to implement that idea? And we'll work with our TEDx speakers and say, okay, when you're done, and say, Massimo's TEDx talk was great. He says, why was it good? What are you doing differently after that talk? And I think if you work on that, whether it's an investor pitch or a TEDx talk, that's one thing to think of right up front. What do you want the audience to do, and how do you want them to share that idea and say, this is what I'm going to do differently now, whether it's investor, I'm going to invest in that, or it's a TEDx talk. Here's how I'm going to do things differently now that I heard this talk. So I think it's just kind of keeping that in from the audience, and then that big idea and the call to action. So that's my kind of take up from TEDx, and then how that would apply to an investor pitch. And Stuart, I think if since we've coached TEDx together, you can add on to that. I'm interested in your thoughts.
Sure, absolutely. I agree with what Rick just said. I have a general comment about not just our TEDx coaching, but speaking in general. And I think for me, one of the biggest things that I would like speakers to focus on is simplicity. And I think so many speakers overcomplicate what they're saying. And I think there are two main reasons that I've identified for this. You have a category of people that are experts. It could be professional experts, or in terms of a product they've created that they know inside out. And it's almost as if they're showing off their expertise by complicating what they say, using your jargon, using the jargon that other people may not know. And it makes it complicated. And I think there's a thinking of, if people don't understand what I say, they must think I'm an expert and only I can solve a problem. And then there's another group of people who maybe just haven't thought through exactly what it is they're saying, and they need to ask themselves more questions. Why am I speaking today? What is my actual purpose? What am I trying to achieve? And if you have an invention, a product, how can I explain this in the simplest possible terms so that anyone can understand? And one of my backgrounds is in teaching, and I think this comes in very handy, because when you walk into a classroom of kids and you're teaching them a brand new subject, you have to simplify things. And so that's a skill I carry into my speaking, and I encourage others to do. It's in fact a great skill to be able to present a complicated idea in a simple way. And so for me, that's the thing I would like everyone to focus on, is just give us the simple idea in the simplest possible terms.
Brilliant, brilliant, absolutely. And with that, you are truly a man of my heart, because after I moved to Thailand, I actually started to teach as well, more kind of like on the side, to get the feel for the cultural differences. I said to myself, the best way is to spend as much time as possible with teenagers. So I started to teach English at a middle and high school level here. And I couldn't agree more with you, Stuart. That to me was a lesson in turning things simple. Make sure that all of the words are very easily to digest. And also, I think what plays into that is the level of body language that we are utilizing when we talk. Because when we listen to somebody, yes, of course, the words are very, very important, but there are other aspects that hit us perhaps a little bit less consciously, but nevertheless, they are as important to comprehending the total message. So I really, really love this. Now, let me move back to Michael briefly, because Michael made a very, very good point in the chat right now, that people, even if you have given a presentation many, many times, they hear it for the first time. Can you just elaborate a little bit more on that, Michael? Because to me, that's one of the things that I see a lot. People are getting impatient with themselves, right? It's like, well, I've said this so many times. Why are they not getting it? So please, Michael.
That's the challenge I see with a lot in terms of presentation styles. Somebody may be very passionate about their whatever project they're working on, whether they're providing information to a class of kids, or if they're doing a TEDx speech, or if you're doing a sales presentation. The idea is that I've done this 1,000 times. And so I know the words I say and when I say them, because I've rehearsed it very, very well. And so what it comes out sounding like is a robot rather than you. So remember that your audience is hearing this for the first time. No matter how many times you've done this before, this is the first time they're hearing it. And without that knowledge, you're going to go into this saying, okay, I'm going to run through this and I'll phone it in, right? I'm not really going to bring who I am to show this off. And the challenge you have with that is people aren't going to listen. I'm not going to want to listen to someone who's talking like a robot, because I'm not interested if you're not interested. But if you're truly passionate about what you're trying to say and what you're trying to get across, people are going to lean in. They're going to want to hear more, because now that passion is contagious. But without the passion, you're really going to lose people. So even if you've done it 1,000 times before, bring the energy, bring that passion, because people want to attach to that, and then they'll hear you and feel you throughout your presentation.
Indeed, indeed. Thanks, Michael. And Scottie, you have been with Pitch in the Zone now since our very first meeting, and you always have tremendously good feedback. Now, for those that don't know Scottie, her focus, her specialty is language and accent reduction. But I always feel that sells Scottie totally short. There is so much more inside of Scottie. And it usually comes through in our Pitch in the Zone sessions with one question. And whenever I hear this one question now, Scottie always pops up in my mind. Looking at your big, broad smile, you know what I'm talking about, Scottie. Let us know a little bit why you are so passionate about this.
Well, the question that you're referring to is why you.
Exactly.
So you need to be authentic when you are pitching whatever it is, whether it's a new business or a story or a big idea. And to be able to get to the nexus of why you are the person who can solve this issue or why you have special expertise is really key, because people have a million good ideas. I have loads of them, but I can't always execute on them. So what makes someone very special is what is the secret sauce that the audience doesn't always get to hear. And I've heard so many presentations where people have these brilliant ideas and I can't figure out why they could do it. And then when you talk to the presenter afterwards, well, I quit my job as a tenured professor to start this startup because I had been researching the combustible properties of a particular energy source. And it's like, well, bingo, why didn't you tell us that? I mean, that makes you really uniquely qualified for this. And I think people think it's not important or that the idea is more important than their background. And you need to be able to weave that into your story about why you. And so that's one of my favorite questions to ask. But interestingly enough, I'm a language coach, and I came to pitching way back when in the securities business with CEOs and CFOs who were pitching for venture money or trying to go public. And they could never really explain their stories very well. So you've got to really understand your audience. My audience at that time was pitching to retail stockbrokers in the retail sector or institutional brokers. Very different audiences who are after very different kinds of information. So you need to know your audience, and then you have to really spoon feed the information about your expertise to your audience. And you can lead them along actually, and then predict the questions that they're going to ask. So spoon feeding and putting out that data slowly is key. One of the more important things, however, that I found is really breathing and posture. That's the first thing that I start talking to my clients about. If you lose your capacity to breathe and you lose your posture, you're not going to be able to think clearly in any language, whether it's English or the language of your business. So you've got to figure out a way to settle yourself through some very simple breathing techniques and exercises. Nathan actually was the first one who tipped me off to something like that way back when I had a weird trigger event around, some of the terrorist stuff that was happening. But really watching your posture, and I was reminded again at physical therapy yesterday, it's as simple as keeping your eardrums over your shoulders, and anybody can do this sitting, shoulders over your hips. If you're standing, you want all of this, eardrums over your shoulders, shoulders over your hips, hips over your ankles with your knees slightly bent so that you won't lock them up and faint if you get really nervous. But practicing this posture regularly will help you do it when you're called upon and when you're pitching. The other thing would be to watch your speed. If things are spoken too quickly, nobody can understand them in any language. And also get to the ask. If you run out of time or you lose your way in your presentation, get to your ask, like the reason you're there, kind of what Michael was alluding to. And last but not least, if English isn't your first or your primary language, really study your key vocabulary. The combination of slowing down and being able to pronounce your key vocabulary carefully will save the day for you. So.
And
wow.
The hint to add on to that is, remember, Scottie, is you always point people to the dictionary where they can press a button and listen.
Yeah. And actually the dictionaries are a better tool even than Googling something. Google has some beta testing going on where you can say, how do I pronounce environment? Is it environment or environment? It's a French word, but it's environment. And we need to, in English, which is a stress timed language, you have to get the stress right on the word. And then using that stress timing, you use it on the scoops of words to let the audience know what's most important to you. And they can pick up on that and listen to where you're going with your talks. So it's pretty multifaceted, actually. All of the things that people are mentioning weave together.
Yeah.
You kind of need them all, but you have to pick and choose what to start with first.
Absolutely. And I would like to go back very briefly with you, Scottie, to the breathing, because yes, we hear this a lot, right? Breathe deep or breathe whatever. But when we are in the heat of the moment, you know, all those thoughts, they go out the window, they're gone. Do you have any tip for somebody that really struggles with breathing? What do you recommend to them? Do you have an exercise that they can do? Or what is it that you tell them to make them relax and breathe more properly?
Well, I start out with something very simple, and that's what I've found works best for me. People are going to have to experiment with it, but breathing in through your nose for a count of at least 3 seconds. And so we'll go through it. And so breathe in start with 3. You can build up to 10, depending on your lung capacity, but breathe in for 3, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000, and then out your mouth for 3, 1,000, 2, 1,000, 3, 1,000. And then do it for at least 3 or 4 repetitions. And that begins to really lower your cortisol and raise your testosterone, which is what we need to calm down. And it gets us out of the fight or flight into this calmness. And then expand it to 4 breaths or 5 breaths. There are, you know, square breathing techniques, all sorts of things, but I find these are very simple. You can do it stealthily. If you're in a group, you can do it very quietly so nobody knows that you're doing it. And when I do that in a stealth mode, I also then go over what's the first sentence I'm going to say? Like, how am I going to order what I want to say to this audience? And as I just continue to breathe, and let's say you're waiting in line to be called up on stage, continue to do that breathing and it calms it. And that coupled with body posture absolutely settles me. In this medium, in Zoom, I also put my feet flat on the ground, and that also seems to sort of settle me down so I don't get nervous. And it's really those first 30 seconds to get started that are the key. So.
Excellent. Yep. Okay, so I love it, because breathing is really one of those things. I think it's another one of those unconscious things, right? I mean, we are breathing. We never give it a second thought. How do we breathe? Where do we breathe? How deep do we breathe? And so I think just becoming aware of our breathing patterns, and then doing some things like you just mentioned, you know, consciously and with awareness, breathe in for 3 seconds, breathe out for 3 seconds, and go through that. And just having the awareness definitely goes a long way. So thanks for sharing that, Scottie. And Massimo, we haven't heard from you yet. Massimo, you also have joined Pitch in the Zone from the very first meeting on. As a matter of fact, you were one of the inspirations behind it. I remember we were once driving in the car, we were talking, and all of a sudden the idea came up for, hey, why not do something where we can help presenters practice a short presentation and then have some kind of a round robin feedback. So I always appreciate your feedback here as well. You're also known as a person with a tremendous attention to detail. When it comes to slides, you're picking up certain things that most people just overlook. So what's your number one tip that you would give to somebody to prepare and then execute a really outstanding pitch or short presentation?
Yes, I totally remember what you described. We were coming back from a Toastmasters meeting, and also we have that in common with Stuart. And it's funny because last year in Toastmasters, they asked me to make a short 60 seconds video on how to improve my speeches. And basically what I said was, I always rewatch my recordings as if it's not myself, as if I have to evaluate myself. So of course, in Toastmasters, you have all these things like hand gestures and vocal variety and all these things. But you have to keep in mind that in our case, in the pitch, we also have things like why me and the ask, and then all the different things that we always talk about. And so try to rewatch your recording, trying to convince yourself and trying to judge yourself. Would you really give that money to that guy for real? Like, and if he didn't convince you, she didn't convince you, why? What could you do to improve that? So two small things for the slides, for example. I'm an engineer, so I'm not so good with graphics, but the basics are pretty simple. So if your logo has two colors, just keep consistent. Make the slides with those two colors. Don't use other colors. Don't use too many fonts, and try to be consistent. Regarding typos, well, my not so secret is the best. Do you know which is the best spelling checker online nowadays? Gmail. Just compose a new mail and cut and paste the text in Gmail, because it's smarter than Microsoft Word and all the other spellers I know. So it can help you to find even pretty deep and pretty difficult grammar mistakes. And one last thing, I spent last week, I don't know why, watching almost 100 Dragon's Den, like a UK kind of the American one, the Shark Tank. But what I found out is that a lot of people making the pitch didn't make a simple multiplication, meaning they came there saying, oh, I'm looking for $50,000 in exchange for 5% equity. Hey, if you want 50,000 for 5%, you are evaluating, you're thinking your company is worth $1 million. Is it really worth that much? If you're making 100,000, 200,000 per year, don't do that, because the investors will pick it up and they will know that you have no clue what you're talking about. So if you're not familiar with numbers, accounting, if you just have the good idea or a good way to make it real, well, ask somebody who has the knowledge. Don't make those silly mistakes with numbers. But yeah, I totally remember that trip in the car. I'm so happy to be there and still happy to be here. Thank you.
We are always happy to see you. And I think you also always demonstrate, whenever you are talking, you're demonstrating one very important principle behind communication, behind presentations, and that is to be authentic. You are not mincing words, and it is your style. Now, we know each other fairly well, so I know that this is your style. This is not an act. This is you. And I think authenticity goes a very, very long way. And finally, I want to add one tip before we wrap up here. We're already at the end of the 30 minutes. It's amazing how quickly time really flies when you're having fun and you're amongst friends. So my number one tip up to a couple of weeks, months ago, has always been to instill a level of curiosity, because curiosity is getting people to pay attention. But I have replaced that, and my new number one tip right now has become to have fun. As simple as that. Do not think that a presentation needs to be such a formal kind of event that you have to slip into your best self or whatever. And this goes back to the authenticity. Have fun. Be authentically yours. And especially when you're presenting online. Today, there are so many cool tools. There are things that you can do to up that fun factor tremendously, while at the same time awing your audience. So my number one tip at the moment is really, whenever you're out there, whenever you're communicating, not just in a presentation setting, but whenever you're communicating, have fun. Have fun with yourself, have fun with other people, and have fun with the language. So, and with that, I want to thank all of you for more than 2 years now, or no, actually we are coming up to 2 years soon, spending your Thursday mornings, for most of you, for Massimo and me, it's the evenings, to help presenters improve their skills and effectiveness in front of others. So it's truly, truly very, very much appreciated, not just by me, but by all of the presenters that have come through here. And with that, I wish you a wonderful day, afternoon, evening, wherever you are in the world. And we shall see each other again next week. And I am pretty certain we will have a presenter then. See you. Bye-bye.